Brother Mohammed will be the MC for this event, inshallah. Just wanted to explain why we started late. This place is used as a multi-function. So, in order for to prepare for the lecture, get the place ready, is because we have a school and we have to clean it up. So, thanks for your patience. And again, and the number of people is less because that's how our community is. They always come in like a little bit late. Inshallah, I will hand the microphone to Brother Muhammad to properly introduce this event. Jazakallah khair for coming.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Like Brother Abdul Wahab said, inshallah, today's talk is also being recorded. So I know, inshallah, there are a few people who are watching this online as well, and will be watching it afterwards, inshallah. So it'll be available on YouTube at the end. As many of you know, one of our brothers recently was arrested by ICE. His name is Muhammad Ismawi, and the masjid thought that we should have some kind of a workshop to educate the Muslims here in the community what your rights are, and know that everyone living in the U.S. has basic rights, even people who are undocumented. But also, you need to know, if you're depending on your status, you need to understand what your rights are and what you should do if you were ever approached by ICE, by any immigration officials. And that's where our panelists today will be able to give a quick presentation about it, and also be available for questions and answers afterwards. I'll introduce the two panels that we have. We have Stephanie Marzouk on the right. She's an attorney and the founder of Marzouk Law in Cambridge. She has extensive experience in immigration law. Stephanie is a graduate of Harvard Law School and also holds degrees from the University of Minnesota and Louisiana State University. Ilham Sofan, on the left, specializes in immigration law and criminal defense. She has assisted clients with immigration issues and has appeared in Boston District Courts on various criminal matters. She has successfully assisted employers with obtaining non-immigrant visas and U.S. legal permanent residence on behalf of foreign national employees. She has also successfully represented individuals with family-based immigration matters. She is the founder of Sofan Law in Boston. Ilham is a graduate of UMass School of Law and holds a degree from Mount Holyoke College. She's also fluent in Arabic and of Lebanese descent. Now, with this, I will hand the mic to our panelists if you want to present, and then we would have question answers afterwards. Would that be okay? Perfect. And I'll be standing over here and for the presentation, and just tell me to click next, and then I'll move forward that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the round. Okay, great. Next slide, please. So what we're going to do today is just give you an overview of immigration law, your rights in this process, and just a little more information about how this system works so that you can be prepared in case anything does happen to you or your family. We are not here to give individual immigration advice. Please don't ask us questions in public about your particular case. If you do have questions, we're happy to answer those after, but we just don't want you to share personal information in the group. So again, these are our goals for today: knowing where to go for help, understanding the immigration system, how to prepare, and in case any government officers, immigration or otherwise, do come to your home or your workplace, you'll know what to do if you encounter them. This does say learn about immigration in 2021. That's so last year. Everything changes constantly, so we will be giving you the most updated information. Next slide, please. Okay, so just talking about what's changed, what's happening right now. The first thing to know is any COVID-19 treatment, test, treatment, vaccination in Massachusetts, they will be covered regardless of your immigration status, what insurance you have. Don't even worry about that. If you need help, you should go and get it. It's not part of public charge. So we are going to talk about public charge in a minute. The whole point of this public charge rule was to scare people, and it was very effective. right? Everybody knows, oh, I can't get government benefits. I'm going to be in trouble because of public charge. Fortunately, that rule has been rolled back almost completely. And it's really not that big of a concern for most people. So we will talk about it. You shouldn't shy away from getting health care or any other benefit that you should need because you might be worried about public charge and what that would mean for your immigration status. Okay. A few things to know. Sorry, just one more thing on COVID. A lot of processes are different now. So immigration court, a lot of hearings are being held online. ICE check-ins, you can often do them by email instead of having to go in person. So there are some kind of benefits to the COVID process that you won't have to show up in person for all of these events.
Yes. And I would just like to add, I know you had mentioned public charge, but you do have to take it into consideration. It does change from administration to administration. Under the Biden, they're more lax, but they do take in consideration if you are using public benefits such as SNAP, food stamps. If you're a student and you're getting assistance to go to college, that's not considered. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, yeah. I mean, public charge is basically many of the benefits that would get you in trouble. You wouldn't be eligible for anyway if you don't have the immigration status to get those benefits. As well, many types of benefits aren't covered, so it wouldn't matter at all, have never been a problem with the public charge rule. And finally, certain statuses, the public charge rule doesn't even apply. Asylum, human trafficking visas, things like that. There is no public charge rule for you. So again, it was a very, very, very effective way to scare people. But most people will not have to worry about the details of that. Okay, next.
Can I ask
Sure.
a quick question? So
Yeah.
since you talked about public charge a few times, then can you briefly explain what that is, and then we can proceed. Thank you.
Sure. So, do you want to take this one? Or I can do it.
Basically, okay, the government basically wants to know if whether when you enter the United States or if you're already in the United States, that you're going to depend on the government for assistance. So it's a way to prevent them from not allowing you to enter the United States or deport you. And usually it's a financial analysis test. So they look at your finances, and now they still do consider it, even if you do have a green card, but not so much. If you had, the new rule now is if you had entered the United States and at the time of your entrance, it was very evident that you would be a public charge, they now do have the right to deport it and not renew it. But if you're already a green card holder and that's not the case, and say, for example, you came in the United States, you're a student, and you're an engineering student, or you work for a company, and clearly you're making a sufficient income, you're not going to rely on the government for assistance, financial assistance specifically, then that shouldn't be an issue. But if that was the case and you ended up getting into a car accident, so that was not foreseeable, it was an accident, it's not going to be an issue. You should be fine in adjusting your status and getting a green card. Would you like that?
That's great. Yeah, so just to add a little bit onto that, if you are trying to bring a family member here to the US to have a green card, you have to show that you have a certain minimum level of income, right? So that you're not bringing your family member here to be totally destitute and live on the street. That level of income is fairly low. It's considered 125% of the federal poverty guideline. And that's how it plays out in the family-based immigration context. I think what most people are worried about is if you get a government benefit, does that cause a problem for your immigration status? Again, the answer is it depends. There's certain types of benefits that are problematic, SNAP, income-based cash assistance, certain types of Medicare, things like that. But the number of things that you could get that would actually be problematic is pretty small. Does that answer that question? Yeah. Okay, so on to the next slide. Unemployment benefits is something that has never been a problem with public charge, even under the Trump rule. So when you work, a little bit of your salary is taken out and it goes into the state unemployment benefit system. So that if you are unemployed and you need that benefit, you'll get a payout. It's a benefit that comes from working. It's not a public charge. It's never been a problem with public charge. So to know whether you can get it, you do have to have a real social security number. If you're working for cash, if you're working without a social, you wouldn't be eligible. So you do have to be documented in that way. But if you need it, it's there for you. Again, don't be afraid of public charge. Okay. So recent updates, there's been a lot of changes in immigration over the last several years. A lot of what President Biden has been doing is undoing some of those changes that happened under President Trump, right? So Muslim travel ban is no more. It's ended. Hopefully we'll never see another one. They were planning to build a border wall. That's been paused. Public charge rule, again, walking it back to what it was before President Trump came along. So a lot of the changes we've been seeing are putting things back the way they were, not necessarily making things nicer and better as we would hope to see, but at least we're getting some good changes. What I'd like to say, if you hear about something in the news, especially if it's a new bill, that's great, but it's often something that is proposed, something that hasn't actually become law yet. So if you do see something that is in the news and it sounds fantastic and you think it'll help your situation, it's really useful to speak with an attorney to find out, is this actually a law? Has it been implemented? How can it affect your case? Just because sometimes the things that are in the news, they can be more optimistic than reality sometimes. So we do have a slide coming next about the whole public charge rule. Again, the old rule is not in effect. We do still have a public charge rule, but it impacts only a small category of people. So anybody who already has a green card, applying for citizenship, applying to renew the green card, anybody who has asylum, refugee status, VAWA, a crime victim or a human trafficking visa, special immigrant juvenile, all of those people don't even have to worry about public charge. It's not a thing. It's not going to bother you. You can forget about it. As well, any type of benefit that is, so some of these are, actually they're listing SNAP here, which I find is interesting because I thought SNAP was a problem, but, right. Okay, right.
To get governmental assistance, or just definitely consult with your lawyer before you decide to apply for food stamps. But it is a problem.
Yeah.
It keeps changing from administration to administration, like Attorney Marcus was saying. Trying to go back to the old rule, whether more relaxed, whether more concerned, and this Trump is more restrictive, so they would consider your finances and whether you're going to be under the government. So every administration goes back and forth, and the rules are constantly changing, depending on who's president. So again, this might be the case today, but tomorrow it may not be. So definitely consult with the attorney. I have clients that come to me and ask me when they're thinking about applying, and it's a great question to ask because it's constantly changing. Immigration laws is always changing.
And that is true. So again, some things have never been a problem, will not be a problem for you. Again, we can't predict the future, but under the current rule and even under the Trump rule, mass health, not a problem. WIC, not a problem. Unemployment benefits, not a problem. So if you need help, don't hold back because of public charge. Like you can talk to an attorney. There's a really great website, Mass Legal Services. There's resources for you that will tell you whether it's a problem or not. Most things are going to be fine. Okay. I think I have two more. Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk about a few kinds of statuses that can help people. So DACA, a lot of these have been in the news because there was a question. President Trump wanted to end them. President Biden wants to keep them. President Biden did issue an order and now has proposed a rule to strengthen DACA. So people who came here in the U.S., they were before age 16, have been in the U.S. since June 15, 2007. There's a few other requirements. Those people can get DACA, can get a work permit, even if they entered through the border, even if they have no status. Right now, you can renew your DACA, but you can't apply for the first time. So if you think you meet these criteria, it's still possible you might be able to apply in the future, but they're not accepting applications right now. It's still a great resource for people. So if you think that you might be in this category or you know someone who is, even if you've never applied for DACA, it's a good thing to look out for. Next slide is temporary protected status. So this is a status for people from certain countries that are experiencing some hardship, some turmoil. Doesn't allow you to get a green card directly, but it does give you a work permit that you have to keep renewing. So this is another thing. Under President Trump, for certain countries, they were trying to end the program to say, well, things are just fine in Sudan. Why don't you go back? That was challenged in court, and it's still working its way through the court. In the meantime, all of these countries still have TPS: Afghanistan, El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, Ukraine, Yemen, Venezuela, and Burma. For all those countries, if you're from those countries, there are other requirements. Usually you have to have been in the US from a certain date and be able to show that you've been here since that time. However, again, it's a great resource for people who don't have any status, who need to be able to work. In Massachusetts, there's around 12,000 people who do have TPS from one of these countries. A lot of them got redesignated recently. So Haiti and Somalia, for example, even though the old date was way back when, just if you've been here in the last few years, you may be newly eligible for TPS. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Any questions about this? It's a really good idea to talk to a lawyer. Okay, great. And then I think I have one more slide and then we're gonna switch over. So stay informed. These are just some really good resources. Clinic Legal is a Catholic organization that puts out a lot of really good resources. ACLU of Massachusetts, fantastic resource. Mira Coalition, these websites are just various resources where you can get some information. It is better to try to use a trusted source rather than what people are saying on WhatsApp, what people are saying on social media. Even sometimes what's in the news can be a little misleading. So when you're looking at your information, it's really important to think about your source.
Sorry to interrupt. Before we move on, so Attorney Sofwan, I believe you're going to be talking about what to do with meeting immigration officers. But before we move to the next topic, does anyone have any questions to Attorney Marzouk about the topics that she just raised? Okay. Go ahead.
Not all at once.
I know, right? we will open the questions and answer at the end as well. So if you have a question and you want to ask at the end, we can do that as well. اتفضل.
السلام عليكم. سامحوني اللغة وسط اللغة الإنجليزية. شخص يعني كان عنده دخل في مشكلة يعني صغيرة، أوكي، وصار عنده كيس وما وصلت المحكمة، يعني المحامي ما وصلها للمحكمة. هلا هو حلف يمين، سوري، عمل الامتحان الجنسية الأمريكية، ضل عليه حلف اليمين. هلا في الابليكيشن لازم بس تعبيه، ما يبقاش عندك مثلا كيس او قضيه او كذا. فشو وضع هذا الشخص؟
So I'll try to translate all of this. So someone who had basically a small issue that never really went to court. كان مشكلة جنائية بسيطة. Okay, it was a fight. So it didn't come to a point where it was a criminal. There was no criminal charges or anything. So his question is, when he's now doing the application, of that person doing the application for to become a U.S. Citizen, and you know how one of the questionnaires asks if you've done any, criminal or gone to court or any of this, how do you advise them to answer these questions?
I would definitely disclose it, because if this person doesn't, that's my opinion, you should definitely disclose it, because if you don't disclose it and they find out after, they could probably deport you.
So on that naturalization form, there's a lot of strongly worded questions. Have you ever, in bold and all caps, had any arrest, any trouble, any kind of charges? They really want to know everything. So it's always best to say it. Again, if it was really a charge that was dismissed, just resulted in a fine, was not actually a criminal offense, it probably isn't an issue. always good to run it by an attorney if you have questions about that. But yeah, I mean, that form, they take it seriously. They want to know everything, even if it was a really little issue, even if it was a long time ago, even if it was dismissed, you have no records, the court has no records, you still have to disclose it. Yeah.
Following up on this, if they do disclose it, is there any effect on them getting the U.S. citizenship? As long as they can justify it or explain what happened, do you think there will be an effect?
So the government will know everything about you anyway. They're going to run your fingerprints. They're going to look at all the databases. If you don't tell them, they'll find it out and they'll say, why didn't you tell us? So there can be very serious consequences from a past criminal offense, including deportation. Like sometimes you'll be denied, sometimes you could be sent to immigration court and they try to deport you. So it is really important to figure out what exactly happened, what is going to be the impact. But you always have to disclose. The question then would be, is this the right time for you to apply for citizenship, I think.
But it also depends on the crime. So you had mentioned it was a fight. So that might not exclude him or prevent him. Depends on the details and the outcome of the case, but it may not. There's certain crimes of moral turpitude, a whole category of crimes that the government takes in consideration in order to decide if that's something that would cause someone to be deported and you would not be eligible for citizenship. So it totally depends on the crime as well.
بس عفوا تكملة السؤال. حكى المحامي فيش عندك قضية تسكرت، يعني عفوا تسكرت ما وصلت لمحكمة، بس عندك open case، يعني لهون لسنة يعني ما تعمل شجار ما تعمل كذا. هلا بهاي الفترة اللي بدي اسألها بحق له انه يقدم للجنسية، يعني كمل اجراءات الجنسية ولا لا؟
So basically, if that person has an open case at this point, do you advise that they still go ahead and proceed and file for the U.S. for citizenship, or wait after the case is closed?
I would absolutely wait until after the case is closed because you don't know the outcome yet. You don't know if it's going to be in conviction. You don't know if it's going to be dismissed. As well, for naturalization, the 5 years before you apply is very important, and they consider that the good moral character period. They can look beyond that, but they do focus most on the 5 years. So if something is open right now, I would say you need to at least wait until that case resolves. Depending on the outcome, you might need to wait longer.
And I would just like to add, you want to make sure that you have a great criminal defense attorney, because many criminal defense attorneys do not practice immigration law and they might not know the immigration consequences if you were to plea it out. So for example, there's something called continuance without a finding, which means it's not a guilty plea, but under federal law, it's considered a guilty. A straight out dismissal it's dismissed. So the U.S. government, the federal government, sees that as a dismissal. So your criminal defense attorney may not know that because they're not nuanced in criminal defense, and rather in immigration law. So you need someone who knows both, or at least is consulting with an immigration lawyer. Otherwise, there's many people that plead something out, although they're not technically pleading a guilty, they become deportable. I've had so many clients where that's the case. So you definitely need to make sure you have a criminal defense attorney that's very familiar with immigration and practice immigration law, or is able to consult with an immigration attorney before you decide if you're going to plead out and accept something else and not go to trial.
And Attorney Safan is an excellent criminal defense lawyer who knows her immigrations. Talk to her.
Thank you.
Attorney, so she does both criminal and immigration. So if anyone has questions about both at the same time, especially if you're someone who is not a U.S. citizen and you have any criminal issues, I think that would be a good resource to have as well, inshallah. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, Attorney Safan, go ahead.
What to do if you meet an immigration officer? Basically say nothing. I mean, that's what this flag really means. You have the right to remain silent. Most people feel, I think it's your human inclination to talk, because somebody's at your door, it's a federal officer. If I don't say anything, you feel as if you're automatically considered guilty. That's not the case. You do not have to provide them with any information unless they have a warrant signed by a judge. So if I were you, if somebody knocks on your door and they say they're from ICE, don't say anything unless you actually have proof you're in lawful status. That's the smartest way to go, because if you were to say something and what usually happens, you say something that you shouldn't say and you can't take it back. Once you say it, it's a closed door. You don't want to be put in that predicament. Even for criminal offense, the same thing. If you were to be stopped by a police officer and they read your Miranda rights and they're trying to get information regarding a possible case that you might be potentially involved in, don't say anything. I've seen clients of mine hurt themselves by doing that. So basically, even though you're not a U.S. citizen, you do have a right to remain silent and not disclose anything. Say, I want to discuss this with my attorney. In fact, I would never even open the door unless they have an arrest warrant. Just because they show you a piece of paper does not mean they have signed arrest warrant by the judge. So you have to actually read what's being presented to you. Don't automatically assume. And if your English is not that great, don't open the door. Again, the only time ICE, you can go to the next slide. I think I talked about that, the next slide. That's a sample search warrant and what it would look like. If you notice on the bottom, the judge has signed it. Your name should be on top. Again, just because they present a piece of paper does not mean it's an arrest warrant. Go to the next slide, please. This is an arrest warrant not signed by a judge, so therefore it's non-enforceable. Again, you do not have to open the door. The only situation that you do is if it's signed and you see on the bottom, that's where the judge would need to sign. Okay, Anna's story. Anna, let me read this, is an undocumented woman from El Salvador. She hears a knock on her door. She says, who is it? We are the officers. We're looking for Maria Martinez. Anna, I do not know Maria. Officers, what is your name? Please open the door so we can see if you're Maria Martinez. What are Anna's rights? She doesn't need to open the door. There's no warrant. She doesn't need to talk. I've had clients tell me that ICE has contacted them regarding a friend of theirs, and they're like, should I talk? Should I speak to them? I always say, no, you're not obligated to. And that's my advice. The next slide, please. Again, throughout all these slides, if stop while driving and ICE comes, you have the right to remain silent. You do have the right to ask if you're under arrest, or if you're free to leave. And again, I would not disclose or mention anything and say that you would like to talk to your attorney.
When we get to this point in the presentation, somebody always asks, so does that mean I can just drive off and not show the cop my driver's license? No, that's not what it means. So if you're driving, you're supposed to have a driver's license. You can't just drive away from the police officer. What you can do is not answer questions about your immigration status, not show your fake ID, very important, don't show your fake ID. Driving without a license is a criminal offense in Massachusetts. It's a relatively minor one. I know that a lot of people cannot get licenses because you're undocumented. Anyone who is a U.S. citizen and can vote, you need to vote on this. There's a ballot question coming up, the fourth ballot question. If you vote yes, it would give undocumented people the right to have driver's licenses in Massachusetts. Do with that what you will, but it could be a really great thing for a lot of people.
Again, you have the right to ask if you're under arrest or you're free to leave. And again, as a criminal defense attorney, I would not talk. I would say I'd want to consult with my attorney. That would be my advice, again, because you could say something that could potentially hurt you. Next slide. Nearby states, CBP can set up checkpoints on roads and highways within 100 miles of the U.S. border. This means that a person may be stopped by immigration in New York, Vermont, Maine, or New Hampshire. If you don't have immigration status, you may want to avoid traveling to those states.
So New Hampshire is in bold for a reason. It's a lovely state, and the police are also, the state police think that they're immigration officers. So if you are undocumented, try to avoid going to New Hampshire.
slide, please. If ICE comes to your work, you have the right to not answer, stand silently in the middle of the room, basically not talk. Again, in all these situations, you can't ask if you're being arrested, but I would not disclose any information and say that you want to talk to your friend first. The next slide. Miguel's story. Miguel is undocumented. One day he stopped by an ICE officer while waiting for the bus. Officer states, "What is your name? Please show me your ID." Miguel states, "I would like to remain silent." Officer states, "I need to take your fingerprints." Miguel, "I have the right to not give you my fingerprints." "Am I under arrest?" "No, you're not." "Then I'm going to lose." "That's perfectly fine." Miguel does not have to give his fingerprints. Now it's Attorney Margaret.
So that's some excellent advice. I think it goes for whatever officer you're interacting with, right? So if somebody comes to your door, you may not immediately know, are they ICE? Are they FBI? Are they local police? You don't have to know. The same advice applies. The FBI loves this community. They want to be your best friend. They're not your best friend. The FBI are law enforcement officers. They're investigating crimes. And so the same advice applies. If the FBI wants to come talk to you and have a casual chat about something, you don't have to speak with them. Again, you're never under an obligation to talk with them. And if you do feel that you want to talk with them, you can get a lawyer to be with you. So don't feel that you just have to speak to people if they come to your home. Okay. Yes.
Before we move forward, does anyone have any questions? I know the topic of interaction with immigration officials is a big topic, so I want to make sure if you have any questions, you can ask them now.
Just a question. Is it true if undocumented person went through the red light, he could be deported? Red light, like, you know, I don't know.
I mean, if you go through a red light and you're undocumented, and I'm assuming that there's a police officer that stops you, I think you could be arrested because you're undocumented, because now you're under their scrutiny. There's many people, as you know, who are undocumented in Massachusetts. They're not under the limelight of the government. But once you start becoming in their own limelight, and there's a charge and they realize they're undocumented, you could be ultimately deported, but they would put you in removal proceedings, and you have a right to an attorney. There are free attorneys as well. You don't have a right to an attorney, but there are free attorneys there that you might be able to obtain, and they would try to see if there's any sort of remedy for you. Some people, for example, have a U.S. citizen husband they haven't filed and ever for a green card, so they're entitled to that type of relief. And in that case, most likely they wouldn't be deported. So it totally depends on the facts of the case and if there are other types of relief available to you. But if there isn't, then I would definitely say that once you're in the limelight, anything can happen.
Yeah, I mean, if you run a red light and you're undocumented, then the police stops you. Then you have two issues, right? Because number one, you ran the red light. Number two, you probably don't have a driver's license. In Massachusetts, they will send you to criminal court and let the criminal court deal with that. They're not going to notify ICE. They're not going to call them up and say, hey, we caught somebody. Massachusetts doesn't do that. Other states do. So you got to watch out if you're in other states. However, it's true. ICE sometimes hangs out at the courthouse, and they might find you if you show up for court that day. It's a problem because you have to show up for court. Like it's an obligation on you. And a courthouse should be a safe place where people can go and seek their legal rights, fulfill their legal obligations without having to be worried about ICE coming to arrest them. I will say the immigration system is huge. They don't necessarily have resources to catch everybody. So it's not saying if you have this issue, you will be caught by ICE. It's not that kind of cause and effect. I would say, and we'll go over this a little bit more later, if you're undocumented, you probably want to at least have a consultation with an immigration attorney to find out what your options are. and maybe what choices you would have in that situation. But yeah, good question.
Undocumented, as well as the green card holder. What about, we have a lot of our community who are students. They are here legal, but do they have the same right?
In terms of what? In terms of if they are accused of a crime? Right. So for students, there are some of the same issues. If you're accused of a crime, then it could impact your student visa. Even if it's just an accusation in some cases, if it's a serious enough crime. So you want to make sure that you deal with it, make sure you go to your court dates, talk to your criminal attorney, make sure your criminal attorney knows about immigration. Again, if it's something minor and it gets dismissed, likely not a big deal, but you need to watch out. It's an area that is very complicated. It's not where we can give clear answers, this is going to be okay, this is not. It really depends on the facts of what's going on. But yeah, excellent question. Thank you.
And I just want to add to that. I actually had somebody reach out to me for a consult. She was here on a student visa. She had a theft charge in one of the Boston courts, and it was a small theft charge. And I advised her that she should face the charge. She wanted to leave the country. And I said, no, I think this is something you should resolve now, because if you go and you get convicted and you don't show up to your court hearing, you could be precluded from coming back to the United States. And she's like, no, I'm never going to come back. And I said, well, how do you know? How do you know what you're going to do? In 5 years, you might want to come back to the United States. And I highly advised her to come. She didn't, and she left. And against my advice, which is her own decision, but that's something I would not ever recommend. But you do have rights. And again, even if you're here on a student visa, there are attorneys, court-appointed attorneys that you'd be entitled to. And some of these crimes are very small, and many of them can be easily dismissed, especially if they're small. So you should take advantage of that.
Any other questions? I have a quick one. I know there's this problem, especially for undocumented people, and if they commit any small crime, even if it's like minor crime, they could end up get picked up by ICE. Is there a way to avoid that issue when they go through the criminal justice system, or they have to go? Because some of them I know that get picked up at the court, like outside the court, while they're going in or coming out. Is there a way to avoid this at all?
No, there isn't. I've had a client, same charge, different courthouses in Boston. ICE picked up one of them up, not the other. So no, there's no way. It's a very good question, but there's no way to avoid it. I think it's smart to go in with an attorney, so that way they know where you are, and maybe they could advise you in a situation. But there's really nothing that you can do to prevent it. But I definitely would show up with a lawyer.
That's actually a great segue into our next section. So I just want to preface this by saying, under President Trump, anybody could get arrested anytime. It was kind of craziness. Again, we're under President Biden, where things are a little bit more organized now. So now they're focusing on people who might have a criminal history, people who might have a prior deportation order against them. So it is a little more organized, and I think not as many people are being detained. They're kind of focusing on certain people. However, if this is you, and you do have maybe a serious criminal conviction in your past, or you do have a removal order from court from a while ago that is just hanging out there that you've never had to deal with, you could be detained. And so what we're going to talk about next is, we can't really save you. Even the best lawyer in the world, if they're standing there with you, there's not much they can do in that moment. But what could we do after you're detained, and what can you do to be ready for it? So yeah. Okay. So best thing you can do, memorize your phone numbers. Don't save them all in your phone, because you might not have access to your phone if you're detained. If you don't have status, where are you keeping your documents? It's best not to carry your passport around with you. If you are undocumented and you're picked up and detained, the government has to prove who you are and where you're from. your passport is really good evidence of that. So if you don't happen to have your passport with you, it's harder for them to prove that. So keep your important documents all in one place so they're easily accessible. If you needed to, you could tell a friend or family member, hey, can you go get these for me and bring them to my lawyer? Documents of physical presence in the US. For some kinds of status, it's really important to be able to prove that you've spent certain time in the US. So things like tax returns, medical documents, bills you've paid, those are great things to save because they'll show that you've been here in the US. Okay. So a few more things you can do. Make sure that your children's emergency contacts are updated. If you were picked up tomorrow during the day, that's tomorrow, Monday, who would pick up your kids from school? And are they authorized to do that? If your children were born here in the US, you can register them with your own consulate so that in the event you were deported, they would be able to match those children with you and help you reunite with your children. If your children were born here, you might want to get them US passports or a passport from your home country or both, so that they could travel if they needed to. So this is just things to think about in advance, just in case, There's a few documents, again, if you have children, so you can give a caregiver affidavit or a temporary agent to allow someone else to take care of your children, to take them to the doctor, to make decisions for them at school, whatever they might need to do. There's also power of attorney. If you're in the situation where you're worried that you might be deported, there are things you can do to protect your children.
If it's okay, we're going to just take a couple of minute break. He will make the adhan and then we'll continue right after.
Thank you.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
Okay, we'll go ahead and start again. Does anyone have any questions about being prepared if anything happens, God forbid, inshallah? Okay, we will proceed then.
So next we're going to do a quick overview of immigration process. So there's two kinds of things. Next slide. You can either be applying to a government agency for status, or you can be an immigration court, which means the government is actively trying to deport you and you're applying for something to stop that process.
What you mean by applying to a government agency for status? Basically, you're applying for a green card. That's what we mean. So more like paper documents. And the other is what you do mostly, which is deportation, going before a judge because you're in deportation proceedings.
So the good news is you have a right to an attorney in immigration court. The bad news is the government isn't going to pay for it. You got to pay for it, unfortunately. So this right is really important. You should absolutely have a lawyer. The statistics are very clear that people who have a lawyer have far better outcomes. Unfortunately, there is no government funding for that. So for anybody in immigration court, you will only get notices by mail. So this is important. If you move, you really have to update your address with the immigration court. They want you to do it within 5 days. Changing your address at the post office, not good enough. You have to tell the court. Another way to find out is by calling this 1-800 number. You put in your A number, which is your 9-digit ID number. It will tell you when your next court date is, when and where. There's also a website that you can check. We can share that link later. It's really important to go to immigration court. So they are not going to put you in handcuffs and haul you away. You're in court. You're going to see the judge. You're going to have a chance to talk about your case. If you miss your hearing, you get an automatic removal order. The judge will order you deported because you didn't show up. So really important to go. And that order stays with you for life. Even if it was 20 years ago, they still have it in the system, and they can, if they catch you, they can try to send you out based on the order.
And when you say they can, sometimes they will deport you, what they call in absentia. So basically, you've been considered deported because you didn't show up. And if you ever, like, say 10 years later or 20 years later, you get married to a U.S. citizen, you might not be able to adjust your status because you never attended.
Yeah. So if you think you might have an old order, you can call that number. It's a computer. It's not going to like trigger anything in their system. Just call the number, put in your ID number, and you'll be able to figure that out.
To add, I had a client. I gave her a consultation a couple weeks ago. She said she was from Brazil. She came over through the Mexican border, and about 20 years ago, they handed her a piece of paper. She didn't know English. She couldn't read it, and now she's looking to adjust her status. And if they ordered her because she didn't go to that hearing, and in that piece of paper that she was ordered deported in absentia, she's not going to be able to. I mean, it'll be very hard. I wouldn't say never, but it'll be very hard for her to adjust her status. Very hard.
And if you do get a deportation order, removal order is the technical term, it is possible to undo it, right? There's a way to do that, but the longer you wait, generally the harder it gets. So you do want to deal with that sooner rather than later. Okay, next slide, please. So in general, most people have the right to see a judge to argue why you shouldn't be deported. If you have been ordered deported before, you don't automatically get that right. So it is important to deal with that. If you're afraid to return to your home country because somebody's going to hurt you, somebody's going to kill you, really important to tell them about that. Don't sit on that. If you do have a GPS tracker, either the thing on your ankle or the thing on your phone, they put an app on your phone, you have to like check in every week or call them. Or if you have to go to ICE appointments, you should definitely talk with a lawyer. This is something different from court, and it means that they're keeping their eye on you for some reason. So we would want to try to figure out what's going on there. So there's a lot of things you can do in immigration court to try to avoid being sent back, right? So if you're afraid to return to your country because somebody's waiting to hurt you, if you're under 21, the reason it says 18 or 21, it depends on the state. In Massachusetts, it's under 21. If you're not living with at least one of your parents, there's a possibility. If you've ever been the victim of a crime or domestic violence here in the U.S., victim of trafficking. So when you hear labor trafficking or sex trafficking, you think, oh my gosh, somebody's being a slave. It's actually a lot broader than that. And labor trafficking covers a whole bunch of situations. Every once in a while, somebody's eligible for a green card and doesn't know it. So there's a lot of things we can do in immigration court. That's why it's important to talk to a lawyer, because you don't know what you don't know.
And I would just like to add, when it says if you have a fear to return to your own country, what that means is you're applying for asylum, but there's a period that it's better to apply within 6 months. Within 1 year of being here, you want to apply for asylum. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, and if you miss that 1 year, again, there are certain ways around it. It gets a lot harder. There's also related things. So there's something called withholding of removal or Convention Against Torture Relief. Related status is a little harder to get, but still possible. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So if somebody in your family is arrested, what do you do? If you yourself do not have immigration status, don't go to the detention center. Don't do it. You can't do it. You can call them, but do something else. You can call a lawyer. You can call the PAIR. It refers to the PAIR Project, which is this great nonprofit here in Boston with excellent lawyers. They help a lot of people. If you are on good terms with your country, meaning you're not afraid that the government wants to kill you, you can reach out to the consulate, try to ask them for help in figuring out this person, like what to do for them. At the bottom, there's this website, locator.ice.gov. In many cases, you will be able to find somebody who's in ICE detention by entering like their name, date of birth, country of birth. It'll tell you where they are detained, because sometimes that's not the easiest thing to find out. Every once in a while, they're not on there, but usually you can find them on there. Okay. One more thing. If somebody is arrested, it doesn't mean you go in a black hole forever. There's a possibility of getting out on bond. Some people are eligible, some people are not. It's determined by the reasons that they took you in. If somebody has a really serious criminal offense, sometimes they're not eligible. Again, depending on details. Lawyer can help you figure out whether you're eligible or not. If you're granted, you have to pay money, usually around $4,000 to $12,000 to the government. It starts at $1,500, but usually it's a little more. So this is something you can prepare for, because what makes your bond case stronger are good things about you. How long have you been living here? How long have you been coming to the mosque and everybody knows you and loves you here? That's wonderful. How long have you been working? Even if it's under the table, does your employer really rely on you? What family members do you have here? All of these things are really helpful. And it's also important to think about, if you were detained, who's going to come up with that money and who's going to pay it. So somebody has to come to the ICE office, usually a green card holder or a citizen, bring that money and be able to pay it for you. So it's good to think about these things in advance.
And you will get the money back eventually.
Yes, with interest.
Any questions before we move to the next topic? Anything about the legal process for immigration? Can someone put the mic? Oh, then the mic is coming.
Assalamu alaikum. Is it possible to travel during the naturalization process?
Absolutely. You just want to be sure that you don't miss anything, right? So you have a fingerprints appointment, you'll have an interview and an oath ceremony. Make sure that you are getting those notices so that you know what it is, so that you don't miss it.
And that also applies to international travel?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. So you can travel internationally because you have a green card. So just keep an eye on those dates and don't miss them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If someone is arrested, whether by ICE or whatever, and through that bond process, do you think writing letters of recommendations from the community helps? Because we have a case that's similar to this. Okay.
Yes, I do think letters of support are very helpful for bond regarding their good character in the community. I think it's very helpful. I always add them to my whenever I request bond on behalf of my clients. The more, the better.
You can move forward.
Where can I go for help? Consult a lawyer, basically. Avoid scams. Being a notary or notario publico is not the same thing as an attorney. That usually applies more with Hispanics. They have notarios, but basically you're better off. Your only option really is to consult an attorney or an accredited representative, such as Attorney Marzik or I. Again, if you have a criminal history, make sure your attorney is nuanced in criminal defense and immigration law so they know the connection. Because many times, again, I have clients who hired a criminal defense attorney and they didn't know or understand the immigration ramifications from that criminal charge, and it precluded them from applying for citizenship in applying for citizenship in the future. What else could be harmful? Social media. I mean, the government is always watching you. They scrutinize everything. In fact, when you apply for consular processing, they ask for your website. If you're on Facebook, if you're on social media, what it is, they look you up. They're looking for reasons to prevent you from entering or staying in the country or adjusting or becoming a U.S. citizen or adjusting your status. So they're not looking to keep you. That's how I feel at least. And don't give them a reason. Tattoos, smoking marijuana is still technically illegal under federal law. Maybe not under Massachusetts law, but under federal law, and that could be serious.
So if you're going to do anything the U.S. government doesn't like, it shouldn't be on social media, basically. Like, yes, don't do anything illegal. The slide that we have kind of shows like gang involvement. That's definitely bad. Also, support for international terrorist organizations. If you support Al-Shabaab or Al-Qaeda, that should not be on social media. That's a really bad idea.
Or the Muslim Brotherhood. That's not a good idea. Or associating with people who have associated themselves with that. Again, they're watching you and they're looking for reasons.
I wouldn't go quite that far, but you want to make sure that anything that's on your social media that's public, the government can see it, right? So whether that's, sometimes it's, if you're applying for adjustment of status through your spouse and your social media is full of pictures with somebody else, like, what is that about? They're going to look at that. So just pay attention to your social media.
Like the 10-year law, I've heard clients come to me all the time. Is there a law that says that because you've been in the United States for 10 years, that will give me citizenship? No. The simple answer is no. Don't become a victim of fraud. You must be in deportation proceedings already in order to apply and show that you are a citizen or green card holder. There's always if you consult with an experienced immigration lawyer, there usually, or in many cases, there is a solution. And it's all fact-based on the situations of your case. So you might say, for example, your question earlier was, if somebody goes through a red light, are they going to deport you? It's all fact-based. So there's not a black and white answer. It also depends where it occurred and whether they have certain type of relief. So it's very fact-based, and each scenario is very different. Access to higher education. There are next slide, please. Here's a helpful list of websites that might be useful regarding financial aid. And scholarships. Next slide. Okay. Student immigrant movement, also helpful resources, legal resources during COVID that you might want to take notes of if this applies to you. Kids in need of defense. They represent kids under 17. Rihanna Immigration Center. It's a helpful phone number. Catholic Charities offers free assistance. Greater Boston Legal Services they have an immigration unit that's very helpful. Project Citizenship is also very helpful. CPCS assists people who are assigned a court-appointed attorney for criminal matters. That's a helpful number. If you have a criminal offense and you're looking for criminal assistance.
Sure. So I want to say all of these are fantastic. They're such great organizations, and they're also completely busy. So if you call them and you don't get through, keep trying. If you do have resources, you can come to a private immigration lawyer. Again, we're not free, but many of us do offer payment plans, kind of flexible payments. So it's not that if you can't afford a lawyer, you're just out of luck. Like, keep trying.
And I want to add, there's also something that's not on that list. It's called Justice Bridge Legal Center. They're based in Boston on Battery March Street. They offer assistance at a lower rate. So it's not a full rate that you would probably pay if you were just a private attorney. And they do provide payment plans, and they're usually very receptive. So again, it's Justice Bridge Legal Center in downtown Boston. Again, it's like low bono, not pro bono, and they're very helpful in assisting people, again, who are of limited means and can't hire an attorney at a full rate.
Okay, we'll open it to questions. I do have a question here that I got via message. Okay, because I didn't have any question before. It's in Arabic. Let me read it first, and then I'll translate. Okay, I guess I'll just read it.
Okay, I have just a question. You mentioned something, you don't get the government fund for immigration case. That means you do have fund for criminal case. And how you get that fund? Like how you hire a lawyer, like for criminal?
Criminal
So
case.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, how you get these fund?
Usually when you go to court, the judge will ask you. There's an attorney on duty. They're on duty attorneys. They're supposed to be there every day. If they're not there, you tell the judge, I want a court appointed attorney, and they should give you one that day. And they're usually in court. Sometimes I do them. I take court appointments. I have duty days. For example, I'll show up in Dorchester 2 days, and I take whatever cases that come in that day, and I represent them. So if one does not approach you, if the judge doesn't ask you, you ask. Say, Your Honor, I'd like a court-appointed attorney. I need assistance. I can't afford to hire my private attorney, and they should give you one right then and there before you even appear. Before your case proceeds forward. So that's how you do it. And there's also a number here from CPCS that committee of it's here. You could also call them because they're in charge of that. That's how you go about it.
Okay, my second question for the immigration lawyer, what's the range like people looking for? Is that depend on the case, or like how much you charge? You charge per hours, or you charge per case? Or I mean, just like for somebody who has immigration case, what his expectation, how much he has to get money or fund, or how much he has to pay?
And it depends. I mean, usually I do a flat rate, and depends on the case and the number of hours. I do payment plans sometimes for people because they can't afford to pay it all at once. So I would be very upfront with your lawyer, and after you do payment plans, I'm on a limited budget. I'll pay you a certain number of dollars a month for whatever 12, 24 months till my case closes. But for me, I don't know about Attorney Marzouk, it depends on the case and the number of hours. So I have fixed rates depending on the case and how much time I need to put into it. So it varies for me.
It definitely varies for me as well. Some cases pretty easy, pretty quick. Some cases go on for years. So it really depends. I do both hourly and fixed rate. The fixed rate are depending on like how many hours I think the case will take. But yeah, I think it's just a conversation. Well, I also want to mention just what happens in a consultation. So some attorneys do free consultations. Many immigration attorneys do not. We will ask you to pay for a consultation. And that's because when you do an immigration consultation, we take your life history. We want to know everything and really understand what options there might be for you. So when I do a consultation, it's an hour-long conversation with somebody. We go, from the time you came to the US, even sometimes before, what's happened in your life while you've been here, what are all your options? If you don't have options now, when might you have options? We really go really in depth with that. So in that consultation, we also usually make a plan and figure out what the fee would be.
But nobody really give me dollar sign. I'm just saying like, what's the lowest, what's the highest? I mean, that's my goal, but I know. Okay.
Millions and millions of dollars.
They gave you the lawyer answer.
No, I mean, for me, I know that my clients are hardworking. They are not usually very wealthy. My fees are as fair as I can be. I'm not looking to get rich. I'm looking to get adequately compensated for the work I do. So that's, sorry, I can't give you a more precise range. It really depends on what you need.
You have a question?
السلام عليكم. ليش يعني الأوراق بتطول لما الشخص يبقى عنده إقامة بده يقدم لزوجته؟ يعني بتقعد من 2 ل3 سنوات، شو الأسباب اللي بتتأخر فيها هذه الأوراق يعني كل هالوقت؟ وهذا الشيء طبعا بينعكس على إنه يقرر إنه يترك الخطيبة، يعني الوقت طويل. والله صارت مشاكل موجودة يعني. فاهم؟ فشو الأسباب بدنا نعرف.
نتحدث عن واحد بيقدم لزوجته للجرين كارد.
يس مع إقامة،
Right.
يعني بتقعد الأوراق من 2.5 ل3 سنوات.
Okay.
ف
He's
مدة
asking
طويلة.
why does it take so long for someone to, like, if someone is a resident or a green card holder and is applying for his wife and it takes 2 to 3 years to get the paper work and all, why does it take so long?
I mean, depends. Are they? I mean, first I'll say if they're going through, there's two processes: consular processing through the embassy in Morocco or Lebanon or Egypt, or the issue there usually is getting an interview. It can take years, like maybe not years, maybe a year, 2 years, because especially now because of COVID, everything is backed up. I have a client who's been waiting for at least over a year in Lebanon to bring his wife over. Secondly, now, I mean, it's again, even in the United States, when you apply to adjust your status, if you happen to meet your husband here and they're on another status, for example, a student visa, and you decide to get married, it's much faster because the U.S. government files it faster. You're not going to consular processing. But usually, what is it, 2 to 3 months, you can get a work authorization card. They're doing it much faster than Okay, so, but at least you have lawful status. But I think your question was geared towards consular processing when you're applying from the embassy in Morocco or Lebanon. The main issue is the interview. They're just so backed up.
بتتكلم عن حد جاي من بلد أخرى ولا بتقدم على لزوجته هنا؟
لا أنا من يعني فلسطينيان. أكثر من قصة صارت يعني قبل الكوفيد حتى. من 2.5 ل3 سنوات.
بس من ناس عايشين برا أو
لا عايشين هون.
هون.
قدموا أوراق لفلسطين وقعدت من 2.5 ل3 سنوات.
زوجاتهم في فلسطين صح؟
نعم صحيح.
Yeah. So he's talking about the consular processing. Yeah.
So I would add a few things to this answer. I mean, it is true. People think the US government works very well. In general, that's true. But this is a huge agency with hundreds and thousands of files, paper files that move all over the country that have to go through a lot of checks, a lot of security checks. Once that paper file is processed here, so for consular processing, there's a service center that does your initial application. It goes to New Hampshire to the National Visa Center. Then there's another process. Then it goes to the consulate, and there's yet another process. It just takes a long time for the government to get around to all the things they have to do. There is another thing that can happen where if your case takes too long, longer than expected, longer than average, one of the things that we can do is called mandamus. This is where we go to a federal court and ask a judge to say, hey, USCIS, Department of State, move it along. Let's make a decision. It doesn't mean you get to win your case. It means you get a decision in your case. But that's a really important tool we have because sometimes things get stuck. Sometimes your case sits at the consulate for years without an interview, without a decision, pending security checks that never seem to end. I think it's not necessarily intentional. It's not the government trying to hurt you. It's just their process is sometimes not very efficient. And they have a lot of things they have to do. Things can kind of get stuck. So we do sometimes have to push them to move it along.
The question I got via message was someone who is an international student, and you know how universities now require everyone to have a medical insurance. He did have a medical insurance, but he missed the deadline to waive the medical insurance through the university. And because he missed the deadline, now the university is requiring him to pay for the medical insurance through the university. And he was worried about now that I don't know if that's really an immigration question, but he now has a hold on his in his record. He can't add classes, and he's worried about his status here. And so, what can he do at this point? Does he just go and pay the university so he removes the hold, or can he still fight it? And he has a proof that he had insurance during that time. So I don't know if that is.
When you're a student, you're kind of at the mercy of your university. I think he does have to work this out with them. Whatever they will accept, right? If they'll accept proof of some other insurance, or if they actually require him to pay for their insurance, that's kind of what you got to do. I don't know a really great way around that, unfortunately.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions about immigration? Yeah, go ahead. Mike is coming.
السلام عليكم.
وعليكم السلام.
بالنسبة لي pending asylums, someone who has pending asylum like for 5, 6, 7 years, is there any other options?
I would say sometimes you're right. I mean, it depends. Everything depends. That's what a lawyer will tell you. It depends. It does. I know people. I mean, it's not always, nothing is always a guarantee, but they come here in asylum, they find an employer to sponsor them. I do employment-based immigration as well. And they're able, because technically there's law on it that you're able to change your status. I mean, it's also somewhat, discretionary. But they come here on asylum. It's been pending for years. They find a company to sponsor them, which would entitle them to a green card. And they're able, sometimes they'll go to Jamaica, another country, and leave the country. And sometimes, not always, and they're able to be sponsored and go through consular process to get an employment-based green card. Is there any way to accelerate asylum? No, you have to sit and wait. I don't know if you want to add.
Sure. Asylums are one of those really terrible inefficiencies in the U.S. government process, and you can see asylum people waiting for an interview 6, 7, 8 years. That's not uncommon, unfortunately. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with your case. What you want to do during that time, make sure that you're updating your address with USCIS. So when they finally mail you that interview notice, you will get it. There's 2 options in Boston. One is called the shortlist, where if you request to be on the shortlist, if they have a cancellation, they'll call you. And it could be tomorrow. You have to show up for your interview, but at least you could be on that shortlist. Problem is the shortlist is no longer short because so many people are on it. So there is still a possibility, but if you register for the shortlist, I've registered a few of my clients over the past few years, and we haven't been called just because I think that list is so long right now. If you do have a true emergency, there's also a request for an emergency interview that you can do. Also very difficult to get, but it's just tough and it's hard because by definition, people who are applying for asylum are worried about facing some persecution. But that's what the wait is, unfortunately.
So in case you got a sponsor, and can you change the status from pending asylum? Do I need to get H-1B B1 visa, or just straightforward process?
I mean, can you, again, it's not a black and white. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. You can. There have been situations where people have been successful, where they've been able to change, or again, they've gone to a different country. They've gone to like Jamaica, go through consular process, the interview. Sometimes they'll take your case degree because technically you have to leave. Sometimes you have to leave the country, but you don't have to go to your own country, and it's faster. But it's discretionary. I've had clients come on asylum. They find a gas station to sponsor them to be their employee because as you know now, it's very hard for employers to find employees for people to even work during COVID. It's just been very difficult. And they'll sponsor a sales clerk to work at their gas station. Process takes about 24 months and they'll get a green card of it. So there have been successful cases, but it's that I know of, but it's not black and white. You would have to have applied and make sure you applied within the 12 months of being in the United States. When you did apply for asylum, if you applied after, that could be an issue, and that could preclude you from adjusting your status and going to an employment-based petition. So again, I would get a consultation, but it has happened. And they've gotten not H-1Bs, they've gotten green cards. And just to be, some people have this misconception, it's high skilled workers. They don't have to be high skilled workers. You could be a cashier. You could be a hairdresser, washer. These are working for a restaurant as a cook. Those are ways to do it.
I don't handle employment based on immigration, so she's the expert on that. I think we did have a question over here in the corner.
Yeah, got it. You want to pass the mic to?
Assalamu alaikum. Question about the Form 130. I know I have a case for me, and it seems like it's getting like unlimited. Like it's taking too long without like having a kind of perspective when to expect like the first answer. Knowing actually is the early stage, I guess, for someone who wants to sponsor a spouse. Is there any kind of news or changes going on for this particular process? Because I've heard the 140, which is like more in the employer side, it seems like there is like some premium to kind of expedite the process. And I was wondering actually why actually for the family thing that which seems like more important is nothing is happening. And I was curious, is there any news about that?
So why is there expedited processing for employment-based and not family? It's an excellent question. I think, unfortunately, our immigration policy is set by Congress, and they have not authorized expedited processing for family-based petitions. We just don't have it. There is no option to pay more money and have your case processed faster. As for the processing times with any form, if you Google USCIS processing times, you'll get this kind of confusing website, but it still gives you some information. It says 80% of cases are processed by however many months, say 12 months, right? That means, again, 80% of cases are done at that mark. Some will go faster, some will go slower. If your case passes that mark, you can start asking about it. And sometimes they get stuck, right? For reasons that are not always clear to us. Why did this case get stuck and this one not? It doesn't make any sense. But yes, if you pass that mark, that's when we can start taking action. Also, if there is some urgent reason, again, somebody needs medical care, something really extreme is going on, there is a process to expedite. It's hard to do. So everybody wants their case to move faster, and the government is just very slow. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. When I checked, actually, it's currently like 25 months, and it seems like unbelievable at this point. Like to say, like the first stage is 25 months, meaning that the next stages will most likely take that at least one year. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you in the US, they have a hard time actually to hire people, because there is actually those are potential like spouses to become employees as well. So so there is seems like no sense at some point when I'm thinking about it seriously.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the immigration system in the US is broken. The last time we had immigration reform was years and years ago. And there's so many problems. 25 months is not uncommon, not unheard of, although it's completely unreasonable for your life, right? So I think the best thing we can do is contact your senators, contact your Congress people, try to tell them how this impacts your life. Once you become a US citizen, not before, you can register to vote and vote for people that will sponsor actual immigration reform, which is what we do. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thanks.
Just to quickly add to that, so I'm currently taking immigration law, and my professor told me, told the whole class that forget everything you learned in law school. Immigration law is the wild, wild west. There's nothing makes sense. It's just procedure. You just have to follow it, and that's it. So I agree with what they just mentioned. Abu Omar.
Unless somebody has a question, I have a question. Yeah. Is it faster to bring your wife, especially from, countries that have issues like Somalia, Yemen, Syria? Is it better to bring your wife as a fiance or as a wife?
I don't think it matters personally. I don't think it I don't know if you disagree, but I don't think it matters. I don't think one way is better. They almost take it just as long. Before fiance visas used to be much faster, and now I see them very close. I think it's actually financially cheaper. It is not. I think to bring them over as a wife. So why would you want to pay more if the change is not in time is not going to be significant? That's just my opinion.
I am unequivocally on the side of spouse visa, unless there's a reason that you need to wait and get married in the US. They do take the same amount of time, but when you come on a fiance visa, you still have to apply for the green card. You're not done with that. There's another step that you have to go through. That can take a year or more. Once the person gets here, they are not immediately work authorized. It's a big pain. And when you do a spouse visa, if you do get in this situation where your case gets stuck, you have much more rights as a spouse than as a fiance. So I would almost always recommend, again, unless somebody has a reason that they need to get married here in the US, they can't do it earlier, they can't, I don't know. There's various reasons that people would do it. I would say get married and apply as a spouse visa. The other thing I'm going to say, if you decide to go the fiance visa route and then you get tired of waiting and you get married, you've just destroyed your fiance visa case and we have to start over as a spouse case. So don't do that. You have to pick your track. If you go for the fiance visa, stick with it. Otherwise, go with the spouse visa. But yeah, it's not faster. It's not cheaper. It's going to take long either way, unfortunately, which is, again, so hard when you're just starting your relationship as a married couple.
Just a quick question. Assalamu alaikum. So when my little sister was coming here, when she was applying for the citizenship, right? She got it, and then like 5 to 6 years later, they sent us a letter saying that you have to pay this amount because it's still pending, even though she got the citizenship. Is there, we kind of ignored it, but I don't know if this is
So, again, people think the US government is logical and does things in a way that makes sense. This is not always true. Sometimes there's computer errors that send out notices that don't really make sense with your case. If she's a US citizen and she has the documents to prove it, I would not really pay attention to that. You can also, with the receipt number, you can go online and check your case status. It should still say approved, even if it's years later. But yeah, I mean, every once in a while, we'll get a notice for an interview of a case that was approved years ago. And I don't know why they do that. It's just some computer mistake. Yeah.
Do you know of any organizations that offer these services like pro bono or low bono?
Yeah, so there's a list. I think Brother Mohammed, the previous slide had a bunch of resources. Yeah, so these are great nonprofits. Again, they're all fantastic. They're all very busy, but they're really good. So yeah, I would recommend take a picture of the slide.
Okay, thank you. If I'm very busy, meaning like if they don't answer your call or your message within a week, be persistent. Again, one that I mentioned earlier is Justice Bridge Legal Center. They're low bono. That's not on the list, but they're in downtown Boston on Battery March Street, and they're also a good resource.
I have a quick question here. Someone messaged, I am on H-1B visa and I have worked for Uber illegally when I was a student. Should I apply for green card or what should I do?
So I think some people came in during the presentation, I would just remind you, we really can't answer specific questions about somebody's particular immigration status. And please don't tell us, even on the internet, about things you're doing illegally, because now everybody knows and now it's on the internet. So please make the question general. It's really hard to answer that without knowing more, right? I think we need to know more details. Again, I don't do employment-based immigration. I'm not really sure, but that's a situation that needs a lawyer. Like, we can't really just say, oh yeah, go ahead and do it. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah, this is general question. Like, a lot of people like to come to the United States from overseas, and it's very hard to get by airplane directly to the United States. So they go to Canada or going to Mexico. I mean, I know you don't do advice like this, but this is something like, I don't know if I'm saying I recommend it, but this process works like to go from Mexico and walk, and then you do asylum or try to adjust your status.
Sure. So the manner in which you enter the US determines what you're later eligible for. If you come with a visa and you're what they call inspected and admitted, meaning you like go talk to somebody at the airport or at the port of entry when you're driving in, you will have more options than somebody who walked across the border. Additionally, somebody who walks across the border is likely to be detained and put in immigration court. They're very effective at catching those people. So why do people do it? Because, as you said, it's hard. Some people have no other option, and they're looking for a safe place, and they have to do that. Again, the devil is in the details. Like, it really depends on what happened at the border. How did you enter? What documents did you present? What documents did you have? Were the documents real? How were you treated after you entered? Were you what's called given parole and allowed to enter? Did you just walk in and nobody caught you? Were you put in removal proceedings? What were you charged with? It gets really complicated, but I think everybody will have a fair chance to try to argue their case.
It's very fact-based, as Attorney Morza said. It depends on the fact. Like, if you entered with inspection, you talked to an officer, you didn't. Did they hand you a letter? Were you considered? Did they put you in removal proceedings, and you didn't appear, and you didn't know what that letter was? So it's all fact-based.
On average, how long does it take for a U.S. citizen to bring a spouse from overseas, especially during COVID?
When did they apply? Like, I actually have a family member. He applied for his wife, who lives in Lebanon. He's been waiting. He applied before COVID. He's still waiting to bring his wife over.
I mean, it's really hard to give an average because every country is different. Every consulate is different. It is not, I guess the best answer I can give you is it's not going to be fast, but it could be within a few years.
I would definitely get your senator or congressperson involved. Sometimes they can contact the embassy and they could push things and send out a letter. I've been successful doing that a few times. Morocco was one of the countries.
Quick question about, again, back to undocumented. So if someone stays over their visa, and is there any way for them to fix this issue? Like, for example, have one of their parents or siblings who are probably now U.S. citizens to help them become permanent resident, even though they're now undocumented?
I mean, it depends on the facts. I would say generally no, but sometimes somebody will stay, they'll overstay, and they can apply for a hardship waiver. Very small circumstances, but that is one way. It depends on their ties. If they have like a sick family member here, like a parent, you could apply for a hardship waiver, but it's fact-based, but it's definitely very hard to do.
Sure. So I would say it depends on the relationship, right? If you have what's called an immediate relative, meaning a spouse, a parent, a spouse or a child over 21 who's a U.S. citizen, it is possible to adjust your status. Like it is possible to fix that. And in certain other circumstances as well, right? But certain other relationships, like if you have a sibling who's a green card holder, they really can't do much for you. Different relationships are treated differently under the immigration law. But yeah, I mean, for that person, absolutely have a consultation with an immigration lawyer, try to figure out what could be possible.
Any other questions? Question coming up there.
Assalamu alaikum. There is someone is a green card holder, and up to my knowledge, he should not stay outside or overseas for more than 6 months. Is there a special case they can stay outside because he will not be able to do so here? He has to stay outside for more than 6 months.
So there's something called a re-entry permit that you can get. It allows you to stay out for up to 2 years. And there are certain other circumstances, right? If somebody goes abroad and they have a medical emergency, they can't return. It will still be possible for them to come back. The rule about 6 months is in order to be as safe as possible. There's not a very clear rule about what would happen. So if you're away too long and you don't have enough ties to the US, they can take away your green card. They can say that you've abandoned your permanent residence, you are no longer entitled to have a green card and live here. It's not clear, I think, on purpose to kind of allow flexibility in the test. So they would look at how long did you stay away? Why did you stay away? What were you doing while you were gone? What are your connections that you maintain to the US? Did you still have a bank account here and family members here and a place to return to? Or did you sell everything and leave the US and go work for 10 years in your country? That would be a problem. There are ways to do it. I think you would just want to keep as many connections to the US as possible and come back as quickly as possible, even if just for a short time.
And I would just like to add, I had a consult with a friend of mine. She's Palestinian. She lived in Dubai. She has a green card. She left before COVID, and it's been more than 6 months. And she contacted me, and she's like, "Is there anything I can do? I'm afraid, they're not going to let me into the United States." And I said, you should be very prepared. Part of the reason why she also stayed out so long is because her father had passed away. And so she came in. And I said, whatever you do not give them your green card. They don't have the right to take it. The officers do not have the right to take it. You do not have to give it to them. So she came in, they tried to take her green card. They put her in a room. She said, no, I'm not giving it to you. My father had passed away. I've been away for so long. She came in with her husband, who was not a green card holder. He came on a visitor visa. And she was actually pregnant, and she had to pay a fine. And then, she had to be very insistent to not give him her green card. And that's how she was able to keep her green card. Her mother, same situation. She's been out so long. She came in through Texas. They didn't ask her anything.
Yeah, as long as the green card is still valid, you can generally get on the plane to come back. It's what happens when you get to the airport here, right? They're going to have a lot of questions.
And it's important to say, I have ties here, highlight the ties, show that, or explain that you pay taxes, make sure you have that connection to the United States, and you don't display a connection to that foreign country that you're coming from.
Thank you so much, first of all, for coming here and for committing your time and for sharing your expertise. We really appreciate that. I'm not sure if this question was asked. So there are cases. This is happening all the time. So when someone gets married, they have two chances. If he's here, he's either a green card holder or a US citizen, and let's say the wife is overseas, or vice versa, actually. Is it better or to bring them just like as fiancé because it's faster than you do switch of transfer of status, or to bring them the proper way following the proper channels? So it takes about a year or so. Okay, you know what it is. You don't have to
No, we'll recap. It's good because I think this is an important question. People ask it all the time, right? Fiance visa. So we both agree. Fiance visa is not faster. It's just not. These days, it's taking the same amount of time. In my mind, it's always better. I mean, the fiance visa is a proper way. It is a legal way to bring someone to the U.S. There's nothing wrong with it. But once you get here, you're a fiance. You have to get married. You have to apply for the green card. You have to wait for a work permit. It's a longer process once the person is here. The spouse visa, in my mind, it again takes around the same amount of time. You come here with a green card. The only reason to do a fiance visa would be if you really want to get married in the U.S. for some reason.
I have a quick question here. Do you know of any websites or resources to find companies that could sponsor for work visa? If there's any resources that could be shared.
I do not. I really don't. I mean, some people will just actually know people who are looking for employees, pizza shop places, restaurants, or have a family member who knows somebody who's looking for an employee. But there is no website. But sometimes there are like Indeed or some other internet sites will say that they will sponsor you, but there isn't a specific site. But usually it's through somebody who knows somebody who's looking for an employee. And usually it's small companies that do it, like gas stations or like salons or restaurants. And there's such a shortage of employees. So for them, you know, it's a win-win. They hire you to get an employee, and it's a win for you because you get a green card. It takes about 24 months.
I got this question. I don't know if it's for humor or it's a real question. A person is asking, are there any white cards instead of green cards? I'm assuming just for humor then, if you're laughing. Okay.
So the card itself, it's like kind of pale green. It is not super green. So maybe that's what you mean. I don't know. Yeah, don't paint your green card white. Bad idea.
Okay.
The question somebody asked about sponsor. So anybody on company or business, he can sponsor somebody, right? They just have to do paperwork. So all he has to find maybe somebody who own a company and, you know, work it out with him.
They own a company that you have to look at the taxes to see if they're able to hire you, and if they're able to hire you and pay you. That's a preliminary exam.
Required.
Yeah, just to see that they're. I have gas stations that they sponsor their employees. They have to be in lawful status, so you can't be undocumented and say, "Oh, can you sponsor me?" That's like not ever going to work.
But can you?
I don't say never. It's just much harder. You'd have to probably see if there's a way you could apply for a hardship waiver. If, like, if you have a connection with a family member, like a parent, there's a way around it basically. But many companies will do it. Like I had a restaurant owner. He's looking for a Lebanese chef, and he was sponsoring this person who specializes in Lebanese cuisine. I had a pizza shop. They're looking for somebody to work in a pizza shop, an employee, or to be a manager, or to be a cashier. I've done that.
But can you sponsor somebody overseas to bring him in, like
Yes,
a baker?
you can.
Okay,
You
that's
can.
my
You
question.
can.
Okay.
And again, they can be low-level jobs. Everyone's always hooked on the H-1B. It needs to be highly skilled, but these are it can be either. It could be both.
Any other questions? Great. I guess you've been great help. Thank you so much for your advice. Again, I want everyone to welcome Attorney Stephanie Marzouk and Attorney Ilham Safan for their time and for their willingness to answer all of the questions that we had. And thank you, Abu Omar. Yeah, and feel free to also reach out to me or Abu Omar. We also have the contact information as well. Attorney Ilham Safan, she does criminal issues as well. So criminal law and immigration law and general litigation, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Yeah. And Stephanie Marzouk, you do immigration only, or do you do other?
Yeah, I do only immigration and only family-based asylum appeals immigration court. So I don't actually handle these employment-based visas, but basically everything else. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Sure.
Thank you so much, Brother Mohammed, for your awesome
Absolutely.
MC, and thank you all for being here. This is amazing to see this turn out. Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.